Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome back to another very exciting tutorial. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some cool subsurface skin effects, and we've got Sam Loy here to help us out. Let's go and take a look at this final effect. All right, so we've got the menacing Sam Loy here. Now, this was inspired by Iron Man 3 and the cool effects they did for the villains that have this fiery core. Now, this particular shot is actually for a commercial I'm working on for this new chewing tobacco. So that's why we're kind of focusing on the one cheek, and it's just really coming out great. So a couple of things to kind of point out. We get like a little bit of a parallax, which makes it feel like there's depth. And we also have different focus levels of the veins, and of course make the eyes red so that you know he's a bad guy. All right, let's go and take a look at setting this up and show you some cool techniques along the way. What we have here is some footage of Sam Loy turning around and looking up at something menacing, and we'll go ahead and drop this into a new comp. There we go. And the first thing that we need to do is motion track the area of his face. If we come over here to animation and choose track in Mocha AE, this will be our best bet. Hit OK. All right, so now we're in Mocha AE, and this is a specialized tracking tool. What we'll do is take the current time indicator, go to the very end. Then we're going to come up here and select the Bezier spline tool. Now, what we want to do is track this area of his face. So what we'll do is come in here. And that looks pretty good. So what I'm trying to do is select the area of the face that doesn't include parts that are going to change very much. So like the eye, it might blink. So I'm just going to take the corner of the eye and a little bit of the nose. And then we'll just select a little bit of the face here. And then what we can do is come over here and track backwards. So we'll click on that. All right, so now we have a really good track of the side of his face. Now, I want to make sure I'm on the very last frame, and then we're going to come over here, choose Align Surface, and then we're going to choose Export Tracking Data. Now, I'm going to export the corner pin data and copy to the clipboard. Then, if I return to After Effects, I can start using this data. So what I'll do is just create a new solid, and we'll just call this Tracking Data. And we'll go to the very first frame and choose Edit, Paste. So we can take a look at this. We've got this plane on the side of his face. This looks great. Let me just add a grid. And then we'll take the grid and put it before the corner pin effect. And then we can just kind of see what this is looking like. So let's just lower the opacity, hit T. There we go. Now we can see that the area of his face that we tracked is staying pretty well connected to the grid. This is going to be important later on when we start creating all of the different effects. First thing I'm going to do is shut this layer off. And one of the things I want to point out is that we align the tracking data to the very last frame of the animation. So I want to do all of our design and all of our creation on the last frame, and then we'll track it back into the shot. The next thing we'll do is build our illumination map. So what I want to do is create a new solid, and we'll call this noise. And we'll come over here, type in fractal, and we want to bring out the fractal noise. Drop that on there. Now, we're going to go ahead and set this up. So fun way to use fractal noise is just select the parameter and open up the brainstorm feature. And this is pretty cool. It just kind of gives you a bunch of random things, and you can change the randomness here, click through it, and find some cool settings. So if you're trying to create energy or different kind of procedural effects, this is a good way to start. Now, I was hoping it would just be set up the way I want, but unfortunately we're gonna have to go and do it manually. Pretty much how most brainstorm sessions go. Mostly just a waste of time. So what we're gonna do is come over here, let's set this to dynamic. And that way it kind of looks bubbly, so you can kind of see. Feel free to make sound effects. We're going to turn up the complexity. It just adds more detail. And we're going to turn up the scale as well. So There we go. Okay, so this is going to be our base illumination map. Now, we want this to only be around the side of his face. So let's go to the very end here, take the pen tool, and let's draw a shape around the area we want to keep. So we'll come in here, we'll just do something like, okay, turn it back on. And then we can hit F, and that'll bring up the mask feather properties, which we can then feather out a bit. Okay, this fractal noise is going to be illuminated underneath the skin. And so now we need to create the outside skin so that we can actually kind of see that something is beneath the outer area. Now, here's a screenshot I found online that was done in Modo. And what we can see is that the skin is somewhat translucent and there's a light coming through. Now the bones are blocking that light. Now, instead of bones blocking the light, we're actually going to create a layer of veins that's going to block out that core energy and create this illuminated character. Now, speaking of character, we've got to give it up for Sam Loya here. Always brings his A game. I found some new tips when I work with him. Instead of saying things like, okay, there's a big robot fighting you, I just say things like, we're not going to lunch later. And all of a sudden, what? Robert De Niro. Okay, we need to start creating our vein network. So if we come over to the project, I've got a couple of different vein elements that we'll be using. Now, I'm going to go ahead, take this first one, drop it out here, make sure we're on the last frame. So we're going to come over here to the mode, set this to multiply. And what we want to do is just create some veins in some interesting areas. So, coming out of the eye here, we can scale this down a bit. And we can duplicate it, rotate it, scale it. Maybe here, duplicate, rotate. Now, it doesn't matter if the veins go outside of this area. What I'm focusing on is where they overlap in this middle area. Now, I have this other element. We'll bring this out. Now, I'm going to invert it so that it's black on white. So we'll go channel, invert, and we'll set it to multiply. Scale it down a bit. And I want to add a fast blur. So we'll choose Effect, Blur, Fast Blur. And by blurring this out, we're going to create some more depth. Now I'm going to hit T, maybe lower the opacity a little bit. And then what I can do is take some of these other vein elements, duplicate them, maybe scale them up, and also add a fast blur. So maybe, a few pixels, 4 or so, just so we can start seeing different layers, some that are sharp and some that are out of focus. Now we'll take this blurred one, duplicate it again, and maybe put one on this side. So this is starting to get crazy, but we can work it in a little bit more later. So what I want to do now is start combining these two passes. So we'll take all of the veins, hold down Shift, and we can select those layers. And we're going to choose Layer Pre-Compose. Now, it's probably at the bottom of the list, but Pre-Compose is the way to go. Control Shift C. We're going to move all the attributes. We'll call this Vein Network. And we'll double-click on that, and we're going to add a white solid. And then we'll hit OK. And let's move it to the bottom. So that way our whole background is white. So we'll close that. Now we'll take our noise, turn it back on, and that's this element here. And let's set the track matte to Luma Matte. So essentially what we're doing is subtracting the veins from the area of the illumination. And this is going to make it feel like we're blocking out the light. Now I can take our veins here and we can add a little bit of a blur, maybe a fast blur here, like a 1 pixel, just to soften it a bit. And we can play around with the vein network in a second, but what we want to do now is take these two layers and pre-compose them. So we'll select them both, layer pre-compose again, and this is going to be called the illumination. Now we'll open that up again. And in this case, we're going to create a black solid that we're going to put into the back. So there we go. Come back. So now what we want to do is set the transfer mode of our illumination map to something like color dodge. And that's going to knock out the black color so that we just have the illumination. All right, so let's go and start working on the look. Now, I'm going to start out with a curves adjustment. And what we'll do is go to the red channel and just punch this up a bit. So now you can see we're starting to add some color. And we'll go to the blue channel, bring this down a bit. And then to the green channel, we're going to create a contrast curve here. And this is where it is. Look at this. Starting to get there. Now, this is why it's important to have a black solid in the background, because without it, the color starts to look a little bit weird as it blends with the alpha. And if I were to compare that, the color correction works a lot better on an image without an alpha channel. So this is looking pretty good. I think it's time to do some tracking data. What do you guys think? All right, so we've got our tracking data here. I can select it all again, edit, copy, and then we'll take our illumination map here. Let's go to the very first frame, and we'll choose edit, paste. Uh-oh. So now look at this. We've got this illumination on our skin. This is starting to get somewhere. Now it gets a little bit tricky as his head turns. Basically what I did was just added a fast blur and just kind of cranked it up as he turned his head. And I'm not saying this is the best solution or anything, but so whatever's going to make it look a little less obvious. So far, pretty good. We've got the basic idea here. We could go ahead and track in an eye color as well. If we want to track the eyes, we can come back to Mocha, lock our first layer, and then create a shape around the eye and track that as well. So we'll just go ahead, track backwards. All right, so we've got our eye track. What I'm going to do is choose export tracking data. And instead of the corner pin, I'm just going to take the transform data. We'll copy the clipboard, go back to After Effects, create a new null object, and we'll call this left eye. And we'll go to the very first frame and choose Edit, Paste. And then what we'll do is hit A, and I like to just get rid of the anchor point and then set the anchor point to 0 by 0. And that way that point will be on the eye. So you can see here. Nice. And I also don't think we need the scale or rotation for this. And then we'll create a new solid that is sort of like an orange color. And we'll set this to color dodge. And we'll select the eye here. And we'll hit F, feather out the eye. So kind of the same thing we just did. And maybe take the pen tool and select the top of the eye, and we'll just sort of subtract this part out. And we'll feather that as well, F. And then we'll take that orange layer and parent it to the left eye. Now we may have to do some keyframes on the mask in order for it to kind of stay where it's supposed to be. You know what, this is gonna take too long. Ain't nobody got time for keyframes. I'm just gonna feather it out a bit. But you guys should, make it look good. Me, I gotta watch my kids, wherever the hell they are. All right, so this looks pretty good, but it doesn't feel like there's really much depth behind the surface. So what we wanna do is try to add a little bit of depth by creating our own parallax. Now, if this were a 3D tracked scene, we wouldn't have to worry about this. But in this case, what we're gonna do is find out how his head moves. So his head moves, and it kind of stops about right here. So what we'll do is we'll open up the illumination map comp, and we'll take the noise and hit P and set a position keyframe. Then we're going to hit M and set a keyframe for the mask path as well. So if we hit U, you'll see that we have a keyframe on our mask path and on our position. So what we'll do is we'll come back here and we'll slide over in time to maybe about here. All right, so to create a little bit of parallax, what I'm going to do is take the pan behind tool. And what this allows you to do is move a layer without moving the mask. So in this case, we've already created a keyframe for the mask path and the position so that whatever we do now will interpolate. So we'll take this tool, drag to the left, and then hold down Shift. And this is also what I mean by parallax as I slide this back and forth. So what I'm going to do is click and drag to the right. And that's going to create this kind of a movement. And then we'll go past it and move it over to the left. All right, so this is our basic parallax movement. Let's take a look and see what it looks like in the animation. So we'll go ahead and hit 0. Okay, so you can definitely see what's going on here. That back layer is moving faster as he turns his head, so it feels like there's something behind it. Now, it's probably a little bit too fast, so we're probably going to want to just bring this down a bit. What we could do is maybe just move the keyframes over, shorten that distance a bit, and let's take a look at that. All right, so to refine the animation, I might go back into the illumination map. Maybe move the illumination up a bit, hit F, even feather it out more so that it's a little bit more dispersed. Maybe get some of these veins away from his eye a little bit. Let's see. Not that one, this main one. Maybe just kind of move it over. Also, if I want to block out his eye entirely, what I can do is take our footage of Sam, hit Edit Copy, paste it into this layer, and then choose Layer, Guide Layer. And what that will do is allow us to see it in here, but it won't render in the final comp. So if we come in here, maybe I want to just wipe out the eye entirely, so I can just create a white solid and hide that, and then just create a mask around his eye. Hit F. And this will just wipe out any of the areas that's touching that. So check this out. Now I don't have any more veins coming out of that area. But the veins are cool, so you could just play around, scale them down, maybe move them around until you get like a nice, cool look. I think having some good detail really helps, especially around the edges where it fades out. And that's gonna just give it a nice, more vibrant look. The other thing we want to do is just sort of like overall color correction. So we'll do an adjustment layer, maybe a curves adjustment, and maybe just add a little bit of contrast here. Go to the red channel and just bring the red down a touch, and the blue channel, we just add a little bit of that warmth. Now, the other thing we can do is add some glow. So some glow on top of everything. So what we can do is take this illumination map, duplicate it, and add a big fast blur to it. So there we go. And maybe lower the opacity. And that just creates kind of a more overall illuminated look. Now, the other last thing I think I did is I took the vein network, just the layer with the veins on it, copied it, and paste it back into the main comp. Now, I need to paste our tracking data back onto it. So let's take the tracking data, let's see here, and paste it into the vein layer since it's inside of that comp. And then set this to like multiply and make a selection just around the area here. And then lower the opacity and maybe just a little bit of a fast blur. Again, this is just a subtle touch. Maybe a color burn might look a little better. Let's see. Shift plus and minus allows you to cycle through the transfer modes. Actually, classic color burn. Classic. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Be sure to think about other ways you can use this technique. Motion tracking faces and all that kind of stuff is a very powerful technique that you could do a lot of different things with. And of course, be sure to check out the website, videocopilot.net. We have some cool things happening on our blog. Thanks again for watching. I'm Andrew Kramer, and we'll see you next time.